So good evening, and it's a great pleasure to welcome you to the first of a series of events connected with the Outsider Writing Project, which I'm involved in organising along with my colleague Matt Fitch from the University of Essex in England. My name is John Wilkinson. I'm Director of Creative Writing and a Professor in the Department of English. And this evening I'm going to be welcoming Eleni Stokopoulos and Verity Spott, and they will be reading in that order. First of all, though, I have a number of thanks to make, as is customary. I'd like to acknowledge that this event is funded by the Poem Present programme in the Creative Writing programme and by the Gray Centre for Arts and Inquiry. And I particularly like to thank from the Gray Centre their previous director, Jackie Stewart, and their present director, Seth Brodsky, and also Zach Cahill, their curator, all of whom have helped to bring this project to fruition. And from Creative Writing, I'm deeply indebted, as always, to our wonderful events organizer, Starsha Gill, and to our program manager, Jessie Haley. And I'd also like to thank my one-time student, Nathan Schmidt, who has done much to help in organizing this program, unpaid, simply out of the love of it. So thank you to Nathan. I'm entirely thrilled to introduce Verity Spott from Brighton, England. Perhaps of all poets writing in England now known to me, the most prodigious. I'll explain what I mean by that later. But let me start by locating them in the poetic and social culture of Brighton, historically the centre of LGBTQ culture in the UK, and very much remaining so. Brighton also enjoys a highly concentrated artistic and political life, with a sense of community unusual in British artistic circles, extending as far as lyric poets. Talk of community is something of a shibboleth in American poetry, and because, like Verity, I spent many years employed in so-called community care, I'm deeply suspicious when I hear the word. But Brighton has a jostling population of artists and intellectuals, independent of its two universities, cutting across age and gender, as well as a tradition of university social and artistic radicalism. And their social activity is intense in its quality, responsiveness, collaboration, and disputatiousness. Verity is a central figure in Brighton's poetic culture, which is very public, outspoken, political, and doesn't feel, to an outsider, at all careerist. Verity might tell me that they all hate each other, but still. Verity shares with the other Brighton poets an attunement to an astonishing range of poetic modes, from Augustan satire to romantic lyric to Mayakovsky and loud hailing to rap and other street genres to the most challenging work of the recent British and American avant-garde. And in this ranging, they are the most prodigious poet of them all. A year ago, I read on a train the collaborative chapbook by Verity and Tim Thornton, titled simply Poems, and it blew me away. And I wrote a response immediately, which I published as a review, and I'll now quote a bit from that review. Starting by reading to you the final three triplets of Verity's poem, Notice. What the fuck is in you? Never latch the door. You have not been ruined, not quite, or if you have, being ruined isn't shit. Things become sucked out of you. Wrongness basted every hole. Waste became internalized, permission never given. Take your tiny self away, strangled by your ribbon. This is a harsh poem addressed to my colleagues, although it seems unlikely it was delivered to their ears or inboxes. The poetic thinking here is fundamentally Kleinian, fundamentally because these lines not only are driven by object relations theory, but use words and phrases as hard-edged things, reducible to penises, nipples, and feces that penetrate or are, there's a hard-edged thing, that penetrate or are ejected at the sites of holes indistinguishable between mouth, anuses, vaginas, ears, and probably nostrils. Essentially, the poem is saying, you're tight-assed, so tight-assed you've become a lump of shit. But by the ending of this poem, you has become ambiguous, self-accusatory, as well as an arraignment of my colleagues, and the dismissive final line, strangled by your ribbon, a charge against lyric self-obsession. What is most impressive about these lines to me is their formal constriction, with a basic ballad meter allied to ordinary speech, with an authority that lends a phrase like, "What the fuck is in you?" a forceful literalism. The obscenity is wrenched into telling metaphor. Similarly, being ruined isn't shit anticipates. Waste becomes internalized. That is, being ruined quite literally isn't shit, it stays inside as corruption. One of the pleasures of reading poems from beginning to end is that what begins as an exchange unregistered in the fabric of the texts becomes, in the final run of 4 poems, the first 2 by Verity and the second 2 by Tim Thornton, a cross-braiding, bringing the threads together into more than a collection. These poems revolve around the word complete, designating what is filled entirely. The first of these, The Haunted Inch, is a beautiful and poignant poem in which the haunted inch becomes a neatly folded distance in its softness, unable to speak, to unpack, in its softness, unable to unpack. These poems in Poems are highly disciplined as verse, as the title, or perhaps the non-title, implies, and turning from their formal precision to Verity's extraordinary book, Click Away, Close Door, Say, is to encounter what looks like a strikingly different practice, which, quote, documents the day-to-day workings of a specialist support service that looks after young adults with high-functioning autism and related diagnoses or mixed diagnoses. Verity's book is about 80 pages and feels more because, although fluent and extremely various, it is radically claustrophobic. The door of the title is what is known in secure units, prisons and so forth, as an airlock, a double door negotiable only with the right codes or biometric data, sometimes involving the manual checking of credentials in the space between the 2 doors, a space which may be any size from a narrow closet to a waiting room. As it announces, this book's aim is to identify hidden exits, not only within the word generated while waiting in the airlock, and it's hard not to think of a Sartrean waiting room, or in any of the building's internal units, or those units of time that are working shifts. And the book's internal units are architectural and bodily and psychic, sometimes stuck, sometimes suppurating. There is so much going on in this book, which I've only just started to think about, including a scandalous and obscene assault on Rogerian therapeutics, the group work designed to fit human minds and bodies acceptingly to their groupthink environment. I can only imagine what Verity might do with mindfulness. These poems squirm and leak and bang against the doors and walls. They embody a case for the radical expressivity of autism in an autistic building and management culture. The tongue-lashing of management and business studies is scabrous and furious throughout. Someone should write about this book in conjunction with that great and too little known novel about autism and containers and love, Douglas Oliver's The Harmless Building. I've mentioned only 2 of Verity's publications. They're very difficult to get hold of, by the way, as the Seminary Co-op has discovered. They're going to be trying and hope to bring some in later this quarter. So I've scarcely scratched the surface of her work. After reading Verity, scratching the surface sounds disconcertingly physical. But now let me end by saying that Verity's work is prodigious because, as the dictionary says, it is astonishing and monstrous, but also I deeply hope it is prodigious in the sense of prodigy as a portent. This is poetry that could shake institutions, including institutions that would take control of poetry. It can be everyone's. It is amazing. Verity Spott.
Hello. Thanks for that introduction, and thank you for your reading, Eleni. That was wonderful. I also want to say thank you to John and Matt for bringing me here, and particularly to Stasha as well for all the hard work. And yeah, thanks to everyone who's been involved, really. It's amazing to be here. I feel extremely unwell. I woke up feeling extremely unwell today. And so I went down to the grocery store and got some of those Tide Pods that you guys have and had some, and now I kind of feel worse. I do have 1 copy of this, if anyone would like it. I have 1 copy of this, but it's my only one. This is so I'm going to read from the book that John spoke about, Click Away, Close Door, Say. I would usually offer an introduction to it, but I think that introduction has told me things I didn't know about it. So I'm going to read from 3 sections of the book. One of them is at the very beginning. One of them's it's a very short extract, a lyric extract from the middle of the book, and then I'm going to read the very end of the book, which is the only titled poem in the book. I used to love to work, to come inside here every day, begin to move, and what that means, to assume a false beginning, is walking up a tiled path, metal handrail, grass to either side, the sign at the front, a defunct emblem, the company tag is bust. I walk along the tiled path for nearly 7 paces. If it has been raining, I fear sliding on the tiles, and most days I think of a, quote, service user, slipping up, entering first a door, then another through an airlock. The first door, a white button at eye level, my hand reaches up and on a first attempt presses, finding no resistance. In the second pressing, I push from the top of the rubber button cover, grey, down and find the hard switch, feel it click to a distant shriek, repeated. You appear through the glass. Both doors in the airlock are panelled and transparent, and I watch as one of my colleagues appears on the other side of the second door. There are 2 doors and an airlock space 1.5 meters between us. The second door, the second one before me, is managed by 2 codes, one on the outside of the door if you're coming in, and one on the inside if you're going out. One door, a shrinking through space hatching to a room to make some sense of what you see. The door is undisclosed. Once the person on the inside taps in the code, they open up the second door to me or the first door to them, so as to go through but not around. They step forward in the through but not around motion, 2 or 3 paces to open the second using a Yale lock. I walk into the airlock. Sometimes service users are on the other side. On the other side, the side of the second door to them approximates the first door to me, the first to me, the second to whoever it is that waits there. To stand there at the second to my eyes, sluicing through the glass like second first, the movement in, the eye remains entry, 2. The movement in the through space will come to be more crucial. 2 horrific doors, and even then, to never have begun. 1. She belies the second door switched into the gastronomical gravitation of the humming pull of each door, the airlock licked a sanction between them. Each movement is catalogued to be dead, or sure, or local, as she sees. You have been in an adjacent room, near behind the door, the body, and I am able now to acclimatise to levels of anxiety and stress based on whether or not you cry out my name as soon as I have entered. Though this lock in vanguard process of correction called a door. It is now 7:26 a.m, and thus in accordance I must not pretend to have begun. Having begun counts for none of these actions. I step 3 or 4 paces forward, and, turning into another door on the left with glass panels, I take those 3 or 4 steps towards the door and pass by a window into the same room. The door lets me into it. My gratitude goes into the door. The handle by the architrave will hurt you as your entry fee, commencing with your body through the gap's totality. To total on your body, wrapped in anxious burning sores, you fail upon its trauma, squeezing through the tired doors. Another door looms into sight, magnificently door-like, so much so it could barely be anything else, so your hand gets caught between the handle and the wood, dull pain. Your service manager wonders wistfully if your stuck hand is perhaps an act of protest, to somehow discredit his efforts. He locks himself into a CB3000 like a bald eagle released at a Southern Baptist wedding only to smash its neck on the shitty circular window in mock-stained glass above the door. A door is a violent article of faith, a rigid compress of hinges and screws bordering you from where the roaring stops. Now dispense your fingers from their fist cluster into the code. First door to you. Sometimes it is locked to exclude, sometimes it is unlocked, or sometimes it's wide open with a heavy pestle to prop it. On the floor by the pestle is a letter holder, purple, with a black handle, and next to that, the copier printer scanner with 4 drawers for paper, and across from that, the 45-degree facing wall is Kronos, the black box with a green screen and number panel, which my finger stabs at, hitting out my low employee reference number, 100222439, and at this point in my lidless journey to expressive life, never could I have seen myself rising through the echelons to constitute the defunct I, this thing, exponent of truth, rising from my baseness into the day, against these tyrants, the moral hingeless bastion of senses, I that in my perfect care would wound upon the lives of those that stand in opposition, trust me, as the cured body and wrist between the horrible architrave and door. I could never have imagined the cut directive fallacy in an unsustainable environment to throw you out in sacks around extremities from door to wall, then out, the ringing weather. discussed strategies for working with you in the house. I wake into the night when my skin is scattergraphed over the sheets to make an itch of the left skin, to make an allergy of the dander scattered to bleed to bed, sucked into a specific septic, eclectic, curving surface, as in waves, as in over the knot the first bust of daily behavioural records or birds. Scattergraphs to track in daily motions, or scatter the fingers in the door snapped, scatter one finger over the... No, why not a commencement of sprinkled skin into the buttons, over your tingling digits like leaking milk shut, a peppering of square plastic blocks with painted numbers lucidly scrubbed like the tips fall out and decrease. These are some fingers screwed like a gluey mask. Glue snaps round your finger snaps clipped. You are the kindest motion adhesive dioxide, summon on location, fire key my lung off, finger raw from the bone ataxia. The joke inside the funded boiler scheme is that nobody qualifies. When I'm here, I experience extremities of joy despite the door, that object of cognitive disassociation, the dyspraxic hinge, suffocate cloaked in a surface of burnt-out love, fails life, toxic, and remains. Sprinkling into hand from cause to open cause, commence with rip onto plastic. The spending cuts to mental health are our disgusting public secret. Whenever or wherever you try to find them, their details will elude you. Friends from the public sector are doing it better than me. The meaning of this is that there are still movements there. The private sector, and it's a generalisation based on feelings, doesn't mind being immobile. The subjects behind a private door are locked there. Michael Gove convinced you that he meant well. Now he means you have left. He's a kind of elasticated jock with spinning hands. First assist. And you have to have a semi-regular office day in total darkness, hooded, lashed back to back on the stool of a humiliatrix, fumbling at the mottos in the risk assessment scrawl. The proactive strategy requires of you the total of blame forgotten. Scrawl away the truths to make excuses, just as in the case of a vow to the world at large. To focus on a specific area of support, to curtail some of the more... And here we come to a problem in terminology. First, we are told not to use the expression kicking off when we don't. We are told that every behaviour has a function, the expression doing a behaviour, and we are told that someone suggests we describe behaviours done as exotic. Problematic behaviours, death drop to you open. Possible changes to shopping arrangements, medicines are to be treated like money. You have the right to refuse them. Shipping is the lifeblood of the global economy. Most terminally emitting sounds like this. Am I going to be sick? Are you sick? Were you coughing? Do I have a demon in me? Am I going to be sick? Said she felt sick. Do you feel sick? And was that you coughing? I will run away. I have a pilot's license, and when I flew my plane, the wing was shredded with lightning. The temperature was meant to remain below 25 degrees Celsius, but throughout September it climbed as high as 30. Heat rises through the unit. Am I going to be sick? I can't be sick. I can't breathe. I need space. I need oxygen. Will Trump be the next president? What are we going to do about Trump? My hair is a sign of hidden witchcraft, like Magdalene. Help me. Am I being sick? All those poor people in Calais, and no one's doing a fucking thing to stop it. Right fist, head in hard table, the Hewlett-Packard Pro 1400 to wobble gently as he do. The other hand open to palm, with the hard of the palm centred on the indent of the side of the head, a ring sticking into it with blood. Who I vote for is my personal business. I can roll under here. When is coming back? Was sick, is still sick, was the only one there for me. Hello, it's me. When is she coming back to me? You storm into the room to announce that they are not coming back. Through your developmental schism, this is the right thing to do. But to me, it's the assembly of a monstrous power structure leading directly to self-harm. But we have only our management's example to try. Sounds drop in too fast to think. The active curator takes narrative components and shepherds them into the space, like the Peckham Strawatorium, which is part of the big society that is already a forgotten district of thought. The trouble with these cuts is that we can't know them personally. The exaggeration is their supposed lack of outcome, like my career. Your identity is your container, your pronouns are spilling your mind. Start your anger once again. The woman in the Boots Care of Medication Foundation training problem looks like Jada Franson. Things are quiet here without you, but the crackling is fucking loud. Fuck life. There are additions to the dispensers then that do. A soap dispensers in the toilet that door out pale green liquid antibac soap that claims to moisturise the skin in the offices. Sleep won't collapse but comes. He scorned the attention deficit and stared as the last one in the freezing shower scrubbed the dirt off me with my hands on. Some of the things we achieve are amazing. Things, by their defining nature, are possible. A thing, insofar as it exists, at least in being perceived as a thing, its existing means that by its nature it is possible. In fact, perhaps by any single thing that exists has proven its possibility above and beyond its call of duty. It is more than possible by virtue of being at all. To claim to have made a thing possible is to claim the ability to create matter from antimatter. Apply it to the autism spectrum. Which is why when the company handover took place, I was dismayed to find the new motto, aside from the motto, everyone has a voice, which is used to vindicate service users with selective or elective mutism, and to deny the existence of service users whose mutism is neither elective nor selective. The motto stuck on me via a bright yellow magnetic badge. The motto printed over a small bright pink backdrop stuck on me that as I moves with me. We make things possible. As a part of the organisation, or being a small part, I object very strongly to my part in the creation of matter. I object, but am I being too hard on myself? We yet resolved this. The inspection in April. It rained that day. It rained, but the wind was not moving. Why isn't the wind moving? It was flipped into the garden. She was there to get us up to scratch, but perhaps her perception of me being hard on myself by reducing myself at work to my work is the same as the hard on myself I'm being when I feel affronted by being burdened with the task of creating matter from antimatter. Do you see what I mean? I mean, what am I for? Am I but spreading negativity? Am I adding something to the general joy that springs and shrieks from ground to sky the world over? Wouldn't it be perfect to be a signifier? A chopstick wedged into an electric heater, the ergonomic posture chair burning in the IT room or your office, the taps burnt water as a useless protestation, crackling and pouring black oily smoke to make you laugh. Happiness exceeds our use of the version we are committed to, the implementation of the actual world, the process rendered into possible. Burn for this evening to begin again. It does. In the low desk light, you're humming through the wall, rounded into a noise I yearn to be caught in, caressing the once pathetic instability. I long, and that is how it is built, to call what's tender pathetic, to yet crave gentle lulls, to call them, to be felt, to be disguised, to imprison myself, to make it a fetish, a blurry open cyst without a lung, blinkered in the vacancy of loft space. I promise to be less like you than you are less like me than ever made us one. There's no reconciliation in death. There's none in life. There's no life left. I detach and scratch, going to work, drag you with me along the floor, through the doors, the airlock, a sudden cheering lurch, welling, hopeful. Your smiling skin. Is it possible to slice through glue? Say thank you, melancholia. Say thank you, livid sense. Say thanks to mandatory training. Say thank you, kitchen labour. Say thank you, CR02. Say thank you, supervision. Say thank you, horrible triggers. Say thank you, Venn diagram. Say thank you, 6am. Say thank you, PBS. Say thank you, departed friends. Say thanks a million lawyers. Say thank you, 50% more likely to consider or commit suicide. Say thank you, bedded statistics. Say thank you, dragged from one task to the next. Say thank you, once jubilant workplace. Say thank you, eroding sense of care. Say thank you, teeth of managers. Say thank you for your change. Say thank you to your tiredness. Say thank you, fair exchange. The person-centred approach, the hijacked corporate antithesis of the communal. This is the end of the book. This is called Elegy. I watched as you burned to death. The crowd was enormous. They shoved you again and again. Someone kept doing something with the shoe. You lurched up. Your chest and thighs and groin were burning. The fire destroyed your shorts. It took the front of your top away. The crowd, who had been baying, was suddenly still. Someone stepped over you. You were lying on your back, your knees were bent, and your feet were flat. I felt you were relaxing. I couldn't smell you as you lay there, relaxing, a small fire engulfing your groin and a small one on your chest. Somebody walked over you. The second time I saw you, the flames were gone. You were on the floor. You'd rolled to one side, leaning your one arm across your one body, the one whose skin was in burnt, stretched shreds and blotches. You leaned over like that, again and again. I couldn't smell it. I couldn't smell you. I felt as though I could. You were leaking. But by the time I'd seen that happen to you, I was already in despair. Such a high level of accumulated anxiety welled up into a cluster of electricity in the corpus callosum that it began to spark. Trauma to anxiety, to respite in despair, obsessive through anxiety, to masticate your care. The sparks attach themselves to whatever they can, but soon they settle for things that are not near. They crowd the corpus callosum to overcharge in well-worn paths. Do they begin to seek out different things? You express categorically you won't adjust. So we spoke for another hour. I was unable to speak to you because you were speaking to me. We want to make you cured like biltong, scorched for perfect saleable retention. We say, please remain. They were acquitted of murdering the rapist taxi driver through burned and leaking skin. First Assist, in its stolen Buddhist trap, espouses the virtues of feeling pain at the end of a relationship as a PCP, that being personal contract purchase, progressive cavity pump, prior comparative period, provision criterion or practice, and terminally person-centered planning, like this. To be present in your pain before its trauma crams you in a stack of neurons bundling the corpus callosum for your dad. It may make it easier for you to come to terms with the thought. You made me think of something when I looked into you, and the word was Florida. To be left struggling with your self-esteem, splitting its seams into realms and categories, almost all like this. Loss, doubt, discomfort. The fishtail braid my hair was clawed, the sparking cuts in fast to hide your traffic safety uncomplied, our genders parting into fours. Hinges make a tear and blocks by two on top of lines in three. Integration, understanding, and discovery. In a living dynamic world such as ours, where the only thing that can be truly permanent is change, the art of successful stress control must inevitably include an ability to prepare for, accept, and cope. Punctured worlds, doors drip into it, sprained to leak for change. The circle repairs itself into two immaculate halves, opposites estranging themselves to one another, smothered by a lodger I've come to call you, whose face appears in my dreams. You'd like you scream at your sleeping mouldy dad through the constant pineal. When you're leaped upon, your total care, a static line, jump fatality, cut away too low, reserve at line, stretch at impact. In a living dynamic world such as ours, where the only thing that can be truly prudent is change, both my fingers tearing both the corners of my mouth, a concentrate with pectinase dismounting on my copula, alive in every kind of language going to die. The art of successful stress control must inevitably include an ability to prepare for, accept and cope with change. Change at firstassistonline.com contains the subset redundancy, which, when navigated to, states the connection string property has not been initialized. I navigate it to it time and time again, and almost all again, really fucking it up, being fucked over, being fucked and going to work, getting frisked after work, comprehending fucking work, coping with fucking working to the fungible, tangible, collectible aggregate cost of work till there's nothing of it left to shrill. You navigate again from home, doing your advice for work, at work, from home like this. You may be feeling relieved after months of uncertainty, undervalued and let down by an organisation that you've given years of your working life to. But fuck that kind of thinking too, negativity that depletes it. And now I have a story to tell. I'm in a loving relationship, which I'm very lucky to be in. But if that wasn't the case, I might throw my mind back to 1982, at which point, on the corner of Albumen Road in Telford, I met a man called Scooth. Or was it Halifax? And in fact, Albumen Terrace? I was walking alone, so Scooth appeared. He was from Britain with a British accent, and the first thing I knew about him was that he was suspicious. Business to business, bald Spott, this Milo Yiannopoulos, what spent all her wages on Yiannopoulos' book of poems, garbage and shit, kettling lights go on block. He wore a long overcoat and a Homburg, and I couldn't tell his age because all I saw were his keen eyes at the top of his wrist poking from his pocket. Reader, I married him. We moved to the corner of, was it Telford? Reading? Northampton Civil Partnership came into fashion around 86, but before that, bare hands in the snow chuck snow at you, handy for the lever to industrial facilities men, Albumen Crescent, and each morning we had breakfast together. I'd sit there eating, and Yiannopoulos, Scooth, would sit across from me in his clothes, the only ones he wore, and would read the paper, but for the two holes prized out, his eyes poking through them. He'd pick up the phone, speak in a low buzzing tone, his eyes darting back and forth, and his hat pulled down low so I couldn't hear what he said. But hair I hadn't seen, just that hat on him. In bed he'd hide from me and, "Your dad from Chelmsford Frontal left you in that room with him. There remains a cold hand in the wind, tries to cut you up and it fails." I explained everything to him, how my school had been, where it was, but sat on the floor to tell him, for beneath his coat he fingered a pistol. Perhaps that's what I suspected. He'd peep at me around corners, so I filed them down. I should have filed for a divorce, but filed the corners of our house, and even then noticed one day a tiny rip in his coat where he was leaking. Now why did he leak? What was he on that he leaked something out of himself while he lived there looking all suspect? A pause in the brief wind. A brief pause sets the wind on course to stop, and he peeled up at me. 72 Albumen Terrace, then went all dead. Now bolt upright, sweat there, your ponophobia for me hurts me. You, my fatigue man, make all the world quiet down. Make me not yours again. Having never loved like this, the disposition makes for change. Reallocate to your father, who I met first with in the eyes of in the screen, who I now dream of when I'm far away from you. The further I am from you, the more vivid your father becomes in my dreams. And I find myself asking you silently from a great distance whether or not you ever dream of your father. But instead of actually asking that, I ask you whether or not you ever find yourself feeling bored. Or rather, I don't do that because it's far easier to watch someone else do it and to nod and express my agreement with the question, with the line of the question. In my dream, your father wanted to meet with you and you with him, but as you often do, you started to fill the hold with minor wounds. I couldn't get you to agree on a time or a mode of address until your father came to us and put you into his car. The rest of the dream is gone. I woke up crying and shaking and drank something strong and hot. I opened my eyes again and you were still in them. I closed my eyes and moved backwards into the room. You were still in it. I was deflecting the absence of my will into the room around you. You wouldn't close your eyes. You were holding them open and looking just over my shoulder, saying nothing at all. Trying to develop a social poetics of work and mental health can only lead to a cyclical resolution of grief responses. Wreck this goal of yourself to a sense of melting, curating the hurt over and above yourself, quality genesis of it floating and fading. When you do it, do this to yourself, this time with a sensory falling off at the speed something falls off at. Do it, falling apart and strobing. And you floated back into the room behind me, which was the room I wanted to call my dreams, where there is... You opened your whole mouth and made a noise. When I travel in the company vehicle, please ensure I put my seatbelt on. Staff are to check this whilst the vehicle is stationary. I put my fingers into the corner of my mouth and scream. Shining off the eyes of you that broke them off the eyes of me. The walls have a nothing in a hole, a vista, they puke. And not walls crumpling, the institutional door as candour. Stop it! You found yourself disgraced on it. Hold the schema. What I call a falling into the lovely sea. An obstacle to moving on to your new life. At the end of the challenge, the circle comes back into shock because everything is expressed in circles. Everything must be wrought in circles because every directive for work has to deny each and every one of its contradictions by way of anomalous flow. If you turn your logics into a cycle, you can undo any one of them whenever you need to, like the undoing of therapy. This book is like a fearful peal of thunder echoing out of the dim horrors of ancient tyranny. When I turned around in bed and I called out your voice, you began to threaten me. I'm in lead despair, the mute one age of it regress. Then lovely Erlander, her forehead on the viewer, a compensating fascist throwing orders in our sewer. Without a trace of empathy, we heard the unempathic, supposed by diagnostics, those voices in the attic. Each structure bolts the person to the person-centered core. Illness as instruction, our lives, the metaphor. The care of vulnerability is fucked beyond its will. Craigmore gets its end away, the workers fucked the bill. Rose was there in the hearing. The colliery tract was dumped in a line of redundancy at the door. You wandered over to the door. Institutions are doors on social hatred, are reconciliations, and of the cancelled, and of doors breaking. So cave, where you found yourself still rocking gently, your whole skin a leaking tatter of wounds, burned but not to death. When 9 officers moving around the crowd, when 2 men approach you, kick you neatly, and one of them has a bottle, he pours some liquid onto your body, which is rocking, its arm and hand reaching over itself, the lips melted clothes, and suddenly you erupt once again into red flames and stand for a moment and fall. I watched you die while they killed you, where the end result is personhood. The gradual and gentle dismemberment of Tom Kitwood. Nothing is forever. We are stuck. And another dream. You are constant to my dreams. In this one, I tried to intercept your life and save you before the manifestations of mixed personality disorder, in my boastfulness as I imagined it. But first, there was the Bowie incident. The object of our hatred will not look at your eyes, and his face goes inside, and his head spins round, and my hands, a hole opens up for me at the back of his head, and the hole is full of light, which shows me to the stem attaching his brain to his spine. I take a knife to it and hack through. The hacking is the last taboo in me. I feel sick as I do it. The key appears in my mind. It is the power source for a time movement, whereby once I can go back to you when you stream from paradise, as close as I can, to intercept your primary trauma. Psychoanalysis has been entirely incapacitated. It does not have the capacity to make safe decisions in the community. I find that previous to primary trauma, you are as you are and I die there. Then seven stations of failure. All of the angels I have heard, I have made their voices, and all the outside sounds, I have nothing. The dreams are local. Someone is standing by the door for hours at a time, gradually developing into their intended persona. As you become better at being a human, so you become better at bettering your humanity, and as you become confused, so your harmony drills to its derangement. I wanted to confess everything. When I was small, whilst you floated in and out of windows to expulsion, I had something taken from me that I didn't know I'd ever know I had. It was taken in a punishment routine. It was not yours. I was not burned to death. My skin never leaked like yours does. Your skin leaks every day, every time somebody sees it. I was forced to kneel on a carpet. Excuse me, a voice spoke, but you're leaking on me. You're burning me. Your skin is on fire, and it is near me, so you burn me. Desist. It makes sense to say that the carpet was made from Hessian, and that there was a thick, hard stone floor beneath it, which there was, it being in a very old building, a building boasting an historic view. I will never forget you. It is what no longer wanting to live is. No longer wanting to live is this. Not like when you take me to the point of death in ecstasy, remaining as an anchor in our love capitulates, but it is wanting to drop neatly out of the world. Wir können nicht aus dieser Welt fallen. We are both and all leaking. Our entire worlds are sprained. Again to the routine. I enter an uncoded door to an airlock and dispense my fingers into the code of the second door. The carpet I was on was outside an office. My hands were on the top of my head. What I wanted to tell them I had done was whatever it was that I undoubtedly had, and the smell of resin and of sugar, made entire to be there, and often to be in other places, to do unspeakable things in other corners of the sprained and leaking earth your eyes evade us from, sprained into 2 leaking fringes in a panoply of human skin in burning shreds. Whether it can be said or not that I leaked, I did. Even as I state this, the statement behind it rests painfully under each knee. So for some kind of devotional clemency, my appeal and confession break out in the same breath, echoing and insulting the death rattles I've appropriated from within their historical lives. I will never forget you, Dan, but I will leave you, and I will remember that. The whole establishment, the institution, pouring out into the little street. To the right, the sea. To the left, the main road. Ahead, houses. Thanks very much.